Woo! I was vibing out to that song. That's one of my favorite jams. Hey everyone. What an incredible day two kickoff with Glenn Galich and the voices from the field. I hope that everyone is feeling energized. And Jose, thanks for the prompt in the chat. I'm definitely feeling energized like you, Sutter. Welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining today for this session, Transforming Collective Giving into Collective Action. Couple of housekeeping. Closed captioning, y'all, is always available, and you can enable it at the bottom of your Zoom screen by clicking those little three buttons labeled under more and then clicking the option labeled CC. And so Jose will drop the instructions for that in the chat. But if this is your first time joining us, hello. My name is Taisha Wilson. Everyone calls me Ty, she, her, and I am the Senior Director of Community here at Philanthropy Together. And if you didn't know, we are a global initiative to grow, connect, and strengthen the field of collective and collaborative giving with awesome programming like We Give Summit. And so throughout today's session, y'all, this is a webinar, so you know. So please engage with us in the chat, y'all. Send some emojis. Let us know that this conversation is real and be mindful also of our community guidelines. Also, this is going to be an amazing conversation, so I encourage you to stay into the end of the session. Also, we'll be announcing a raffle winner to receive a cool prize, so y'all hang tight for our next hour together. All right, so we got that housekeeping out the way. A little bit of framing, y'all, with this session, for this session that I'm incredibly, I was so excited and honored to bring this group together. We truly are living through a pivotal moment, as we all know, right? The nonprofit sector, the organizations on the front lines of our community are really navigating some unprecedented pressure. And so with funding restrictions and trust, y'all, is being tested, and the space to do good freely and boldly really feels a little fragile for us right now, more than it has in a very long time, right? And yet, just like y'all comments, we all believe deeply that, you know, there is hope and we have every resources that we need to change this, right? And so the people in this room, we are giving together, making decisions together, and being here today at We Give Summit is a testament in how we're just showing up together and for one another. And y'all, that is not a small thing. That is power. And Glenn said it in the keynote earlier that we have a lot of power and resources collectively. And so, but those power and resources are only transformative, y'all, when it's coordinated, when it's unified, when every part of our philanthropic ecosystem, which includes giving circles, collaborative funds, philanthropy, infrastructure organizations, nonprofits, consultants, everybody has a role to play together. And so that is actually what today's conversation is about. This is about collective action that strengthens our democracy and protecting the freedom of community-based organizations to do their work, and discovering that collective giving, when it extends beyond the grant into advocacy and action, becomes something even more extraordinary. And so with that framing shared, y'all, we have four brilliant leaders with us today, representing the full breadth of our philanthropic ecosystem to help us understand not just why this moment demands action, but how we can act together starting today. And so Matthew, Melanie, Ellen, Melissa, thank y'all so much for saying yes, for being a spark for us today and lifting up your voice. We are so ready to listen and learn. And so with that, Matthew L. Evans, I'm going to turn it on over to you, brother.
Thanks, Ty. I really appreciate that introduction and you level setting this important moment. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew L. Evans. I am the Vice President of Advocacy and External Relations for United Philanthropy Forum. The Forum is the largest network in American philanthropy. Think of us sort of as an association of associations. Our members are philanthropic infrastructure organizations that have foundations as their members. And so collectively, we represent over 7,000 foundations from coast to coast. And our work is grounded really in equity, as well as making sure the philanthropic practice is doing for the common good. And so one of the biggest pillars of our work is advocacy and public policy. This is an interesting time, as Ty mentioned. And so I'm just going to break down where we are now and then work with our colleagues here today to talk about where we can go together. Something, just a quick note about the forum's public policy work. Our work is grounded in our fundamental belief that goals of promoting a strong and philanthropic sector and thriving, sustainable communities are inextricably linked. They're not mutually exclusive. And so when you think about public policy and advocacy from an association model here in Washington, D.C., for a long time, many sectors, including philanthropy, have led with what we call a sector protection focus. And so that means all the policies that impact pretty much your business's bottom line, you either advocate for or against. And so for a long time, philanthropy was solely interested from a public policy standpoint in advocating for the best tax models for our sector, et cetera. But when a few years ago at the forum, we had a brainstorming session and we said to ourselves, philanthropy is also uniquely positioned more than any other sector to ensure that we advocate for the communities that we work in and with as well. And so our public policy framework, our agenda leads with the strong sector, but also with making sure that we advocate for policies that lead to vibrant and healthy communities. So those investments that philanthropy makes in those communities can show dividends, but we know that they can only be one-time investments if we don't invest also in advocacy, because we know about systems change and we know how some public policy positions make for the conditions that communities find themselves in. And so we know that philanthropy in many ways, is here because of bad public policy, whether it is intentional in some cases and non-intentional. And so we think it's high time that philanthropy not only think about investments and making sure we are right at grant making, but also adding advocacy as a key pillar to your everyday philanthropic toolbox. And so that's the work that we have ahead of us. Just a bit of framing. Last year, we saw an unprecedented level of challenges and threats against the sector and the communities we serve. This came in the form of executive orders targeting philanthropy. This came in form of legislative provisions in HR 1, which would have levied excise tax that would have on philanthropy that would have taken about $2.9 billion annually out of communities. And then you have regulatory scrutiny that continues today. And so at every level of the federal government, philanthropy is facing an onslaught of attacks that it's never seen before. That is not hyperbole. But I think when I say it's never been seen before, there is some groundwork that has been laid before. And so with everything in America, we have a history lesson to learn here. And so I'll just share that in 1969, when President Nixon at the time signed the 1969 Tax Act, in many ways that the provision in that piece of legislation laid the groundwork for the way philanthropy operates today. But in many ways, that was retribution, also punishment to the sector for their help and their involvement in the civil rights movement and getting the Voting Rights Act passed. Now, fast forward 2020, post George Floyd, we have racial equity as sort of a burgeoning topic here in the sector. And now what you're seeing only 6 years later, 5 years if you count last year, is that retribution coming back for the sector's work in those areas. And so we have to say that, name that, because sometimes people might be wondering why. But history always shows us a lesson, and that's why we're here today. So last year, what the forum did is start our advocacy, awareness, and action campaign. It was built for both the short term and the long term. In the short term, we were able to, with our partners across the country, across the country, and national partners here in DC, beat back the excise tax that would have been levied on foundations. So that was stripped from the legislation. We are also, through our efforts, able to include the universal charitable deduction in that legislation. But we know that legislation sort of presented some cruel irony. The irony is that while that provision was implemented in the bill, the larger bill, as all of you now know, really sort of tore apart the safety net that holds some of America's most vulnerable population. And so the irony is that while it increased charitable giving incentives, it also increases the need for charity in a lot of communities. So there's still work to do. And so the second part of our advocacy, awareness, and action campaign really talks about long-term efforts, both in narrative and also passing legislation that protects philanthropy's ability to give unencumbered. So a lot of things to talk about here, but I think it's important to think about how we can make sure those goals, like the ones I just laid out, can go across the finish line. And I'll say the last focus really for us is building a long-term sector advocacy infrastructure so that when things like this happen again, we're not just reacting, but we can pivot to a more proactive stance in the future. So that's why I think that's why important is for the broader sector and collective giving communities just need to understand what's at stake. And so I think part of our coordinated response is working with partners like Philanthropy Together, being able to talk to you all here today and let you know that the work before us is daunting, but collectively we can get it done. Progress is a slow process. I know most folks don't like Washington, but they make the rules that impact the work we do, and more importantly, the communities we serve. And so I'm looking forward to having this conversation about the opportunity for collective givers and the broader sector and how uniquely positioned they are to join the work. And I'll start by turning it over to my colleague, Melanie Allen. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Matthew, and thank you for that introduction. I could not underscore how important kind of what you shared is, and this infrastructure of us being able to protect the right for folks to be able to give in the way that we need to give, but also advocacy as one of our most powerful and underutilized tools as philanthropy. Hi, my name is Melanie Allen, and I am honored to serve as the CEO of the Hive Fund for Climate and Gender Justice. Hive Fund is a collaborative fund that raises money and makes grants to groups that are working to accelerate the transition from dirty to clean energy in the US South. And we do that in ways that center justice, redistribute power, and help create healthier, safer, and more prosperous communities. And, representing Hive Fund, I'm also in some ways representing a growing group of more than 500 collaborative funds globally. And while this is a model that's existed for quite some time, we've truly seen the growth of this structure of giving in the last decade. I think Bridgespan reports that collaborative funds represent anywhere between $4 and $7 billion in giving annually. And, I think it's really important to recognize this is a growing and evolving structure in our field. And collaborative funds pool resources from multiple donors to be able to put that towards a specific mission. And I don't think it's an accident that we're seeing the growth of collaborative funds in this moment. Actually, I think it's a reflection of the times because research also shows that 70% of collaborative funds have racial justice or gender justice right at the core of their values, their practices. And so I think it is a response specifically to this moment. When I think of collaborative funds, I think of us as a powerful force. And I haven't always thought that way. I have worked in the nonprofit sector, mainly in advocacy organizations, and some over the course of the last 20 years. I've had some breaks to working political campaigns, but I remember early in my career when I was full of passion, very bright-eyed, and definitely believed that we could achieve justice in many of the organizations that I was working, but I would be really shy to ask folks for money. And then I had a development director who instilled in me that fundraising isn't just an ask, it's an invitation and an offer. And so now I think of my role as a fundraiser and as a grant maker as one of giving people an opportunity to act on their values. And I think, what Matthew has said, and I think trying to underscore for us, is that the work that so many of our institutions do, whether a collaborative fund or the other types of institutions you'll hear about in the ecosystem, is an opportunity for folks to make their voice heard. And sometimes that is through money. Um, and, collaborative funds like the Hive Fund are critical because I think we're purpose built for this moment. And we approach this moment with clarity about the connection between resources and movement work. And there's been many times in my career where there's been this question like, is philanthropy a part of the movement? Is philanthropy a resourcing movement? And I feel really proud to, I think, be able to sit in this space that we talk about as the messy middle between movement and money, where we have to have like our hands and feet and relationships like on both sides of the aisle, really being a bridge and pulling them together. Because what we know is that resources are necessary to move the work that we need to move to bring about things like climate action, to bring us closer to democracy. But we also know that too often the organizations that are doing this work do not get the types of resources that they need to be able to do this work over the long term, to make sure that this work is enduring. And as Matthew pointed out before, oftentimes when there are successes in this work, we see a reaction, not just from folks who may, believe differently than we do, but sometimes even from the federal government or the folks that make the rules themselves. So I want to talk a little bit about collaborative funds as, important infrastructure. But, I think in this moment, again, collaborative funds being purpose built for this moment, when I think about globally what we're seeing in the rise of authoritarianism, of white supremacy, increase in gender-based violence and femicide, having 70%, of these funds focused on racial justice and gender justice is really important because too often the folks that are leading these fights and leading this work feel like they're alone. And so to be able to say that there's 70% of $7 billion that's committed to advancing the work that you're seeking to move is an important reminder that across the globe, there are people that are committed to this fight, that folks that are on the front lines aren't in this fight alone. At the Hive Fund, what we say is put your money where the South is. We fund a place that so often people disregard as, a site where change is not possible, where they don't believe that work can happen. And, what we've seen is that collaborative funds are really important infrastructure because even in a world where individual foundations may not be as upfront about the work that they're doing, or donors may be reticent to, shout from the rooftop what they're giving to. Collaborative funds are a vehicle where they can put their resources. And we're going to say unabashedly that we are funding racial justice in the South. And no matter, who is pulling back on resources, or if a government is saying that if you say this word or say that word, then you're no longer going to get government resources, it matters to be able to get a check that says, what you're fighting for, climate justice or gender justice, you're going to see that on the check when you see our name. I also think about collaborative funds as really important infrastructure because, when we talk about the relationship between movement and money, we are committed to moving money. And we can often move it more nimbly and responsibly than other folks that sit at different types of foundations or move money through different types of institutions. And as a fundraiser, sometimes I wish we did have that endowment and that I did not have to go out and raise every dollar that we move. But I think it's really, really important that it's kind of flipped from what we see at endowed foundations, that the money at collaborative funds is by and large, most of it is going to be moving to the field. There's only a small percent that's going to be kept for operations. And that's critical, particularly in a moment like this, where there's a big political sea change. And, other funding institutions may need to take a lot of time to reorient, change a strategy, or understand what's happening. Collaborative funds have been able to be nimble and responsive when folks are either pulling back or not moving at all. I think of collaborative funds as being our best when we are disruptive. We think at the Hive Fund that part of the beauty of being a collaborative fund is that we don't just get to move money in ways that are aligned with our values, but we get to hold an organization where we get to practice those values. We get to care about people, pay people in the way that we think they should be paid inside our organization, and then we get to operationalize that in grant practice to understand what it means to do that for our partners. Because we can't fight for paid family leave and childcare supports in policy if where we have power we're not in practice about what it looks like to create that for ourselves. And so it's been a really powerful site of opportunity, but also a place where we can act on our values and where we can have pilots that we can point to as our folks are seeking to move policy to say, actually, this is possible. We've done it in our institutions, and then like our partners in Georgia, who we funded to have a pooled fund that supported childcare across nonprofit institutions. They can say we've now done it in our network, and we've been able to see it turn to policy so that it can move in our municipalities. So it's really, really important work for us because we get to do the work of not only dreaming, but creating inside the institutions that we have. When I talk about us being disruptive, it's not just like what we want to see on the outside world, but it's also us being disruptive in this philanthropic space. I think collaborative funds exist because we believe that philanthropy can be better. What that looked like when Hive Fund was started is that, we started when climate philanthropy was $2 billion with a B. 2 billion. And that was just in the US. And at that point in 2019, less than 2% of that climate philanthropy went to organizations that called themselves or their work environmental justice. Less than 2% went to folks that were organizations that were led by people of color. And so, we had conversations with folks around why that was, why, if they had racial justice on their website and we're talking about equity, we didn't see the money moving in those ways. And, we got a lot of different answers, but one that we got is that people didn't know where they were. So I remember that first year when we made grants and we, in our little region of the South, were able to lift up 50 organizations. I'm like, okay, they didn't exist before. Now we have lifted them up and really kind of proven that, taking away the excuses for folks to not act in alignment with what they said they were going to do and not act in alignment with their values. Um, so I'm really, really excited to be in conversation with the folks that are operating at all the other areas that make our ecosystem strong. And I am going to pass it back to Matthew to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Really appreciate that. Now I'm going to introduce Melissa Walker to come on camera and talk about her work. So Melissa, look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for joining this conversation.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks, y'all. I am Melissa Walker. I'm from the States Project. I was off camera, but nodding my head so much through both of y'all's time. We are definitely aligned and in sync, and I really love that. I work with the States Project and specifically with our Giving Circles program. So I work a lot with collective giving and people who are working to develop their political fluency to figure out where power, how power works in this country and where it's really centered. I'm going to tell a very brief story about how I got involved with the States Project just to zero in on our work. And then I just want to share a little bit more about what I've learned from working with Giving Circle leaders and Giving Circles who are doing this collaborative funding. It's been really amazing. So my history is that I write young adult and middle grade novels, and that's what I had been doing for a long time, as well as editing teen magazines. I came to this work honestly because of the 2016 election. I was surprised at the presidential outcome and felt that I wanted to engage and do some advocacy and couldn't figure out where I could have an impact. But I was lucky enough to hear a New York State senator speak, and I really started to understand that the things that I cared about domestically in this country were being decided in state capitals and not in Washington, D.C., from education funding to environmental policy to healthcare to civil rights. to voting rights and gerrymandering, as we're hearing a lot about in the news, all happening in state houses across the country. And I started connecting the dots on a bunch of things that hadn't made sense to me, like the bathroom bills, which passed first in my home state of North Carolina and then across the country. The Stand Your Ground gun bill passing in Tallahassee, letting Trayvon Martin's murderer go free, and then passing in 26 other states. And I realized those are lawmakers in Raleigh and Tallahassee, and I don't know any of their names. So I started to look at state capitals as a place to focus, and I started a giving circle with friends, family, networks to focus on electing majorities that would improve people's lives in state capitals. And we actually met with Daniel Squadron, who's the founder of the States Project. He was that New York State senator who was speaking. But once we formed our giving circle and he got some other support from around the ecosystem, he was able to resign from the New York State Senate and start the States Project so that we could have an organization focused on building state legislative power, which is something that the right wing has been doing for a very long time. So we were the first giving circle with the States Project in Virginia in 2017, and we helped fill the final campaign gaps for 10 candidates. 9 of them won their seats, and the balance of power got so close to shifting just 1 seat away from flipping in Richmond that the next year Virginia expanded Medicaid, and 400,000 people got health care who hadn't had it before. And our circle felt so connected to that outcome, and we wanted to see more change. So we went back to do it in 2018 and 2019 and 2020. We're now on year 10. And I started a Giving Circles program at the States Project to support other people who wanted to do this work with us. And we now have 200 Giving Circles across the country, helping us target state legislative races and work in this space. And one of the things that I think is very powerful about this is not only, does it bring resources to the work that are very needed, it is often cheaper to change the balance of power in an entire state chamber than it is to win a single competitive congressional seat. So when folks get together and focus on this place of immense power, they actually can get incredible bang for the buck. And also, there's a really important piece to the collective giving model at the States Project, which is helping people develop that political fluency to understand where power is flowing from in this country. One of the things that I love so much about this work is really, I feel that we are supporting grassroots leaders from the bottom up. And I mean that not only in the case of state legislators who are winning seats and building a bench to go on to higher office, but also within our Giving Circles community, because I tell everyone who forms one of these groups that they have turned on the porch light for strategic political giving among their neighbors, their friends, and their families. And friends don't let friends give non-strategic political donations. So doing that together and helping people understand that there are places that can have true impact, that I think is really important. There is also something about giving circles that brings together people in a time of real isolation. And I think especially on the political front, people can feel very alone and panicked and outraged every time they pick up their phone and get a news alert. That we are in a very tough moment in our nation's history. And one of the most important things that we can do is work together with other people, and not just with other people, but with our people. And that's what giving circles really do. They bring together people who share our values onto a front porch, into a backyard, into a living room, onto a Zoom call, and they make us all feel less alone. As Melanie said, there are real true core values here. Our groups have formed around choice, around voting access, around climate issues. And they have a lens on this and know that state legislative power touches all of those things, even more than DC can. And they bring that knowledge to the rest of the folks in their networks. There's real strategy here. And I once had someone in a gathering sarcastically asked me, a giving circle, what's that? Like a knitting circle, like a sewing circle? And I said, yeah, if sewing circles had knives that could strategically target power, because that's what we're doing here. And I think that there is something around the idea that soft power is not as meaningful as hard power. I think our world values hard power and hard skills versus soft skills. But I'm going to say something. Our giving circles and everyone I've met who's involved in collective giving has soft skills, and soft skills are what move the world. They are absolutely the human skills that we have of working together and bringing our folks together. That is what's going to outlast AI and all the things that are coming, our human relationships. Togetherness in a time of extreme isolation and conflict, it is a balm for our souls and it is power. I think that is really important. So our giving circles and all giving circles truly are a way not just to act, but to really heal our souls. There's something about being in community with other people that works to do that. And I have seen more and more people growing their giving circles, having hard conversations with neighbors and family members, but talking to them about values. And I truly believe that this is how we change the world. So I'll stop there, but thanks for my time.
Thank you, Melissa. Really appreciate that. That's awesome. Such a great conversation already. So I'm excited to invite my Forum Network colleague, Ellen Collins, onto this conversation to provide her perspective, and then we'll get into a broader discussion. So Ellen?
Okay. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you both, Melanie and Melissa. My name's Ellen Collins. I'm the executive director of the Mississippi Alliance of Nonprofits and Philanthropy. And as Matthew said, we're colleagues because the Alliance is what I call a hybrid organization. We are the State Association for Nonprofits as well as the Philanthropy Infrastructure Organization in our state. And so we exist to provide what is the traditional training and capacity building services for nonprofits, but we also provide support and resources and knowledge for our philanthropic members as well. And so I'm happy to be here with you today just to talk about a little bit about an initiative that we embarked on in 2024 when we partnered with the Fidelity Catalyst Fund to support and expand giving circles in Mississippi. And the purpose of that was to democratize philanthropy. We know that philanthropy means the love of humanity. And so what we wanted to express and to share across our state was that you don't have to be wealthy to be a philanthropist. And we're taking that back to the people and back to the local communities. And so we partnered with 4 organizations within our state. 2 are community foundations. One is our statewide, I would call it gender justice, Melanie, with our Women's Foundation of Mississippi, and one nonprofit organization called the Lighthouse Black Girls Project. And we were very excited to partner with them to do this work because I was friends with the founder. And I remember when she founded that organization, she told people that all she wanted to do was to let Black girls be Black girls. And so as a part of that project, they get to decide some of the things that they're going to work on. And when I approached her about starting a giving circle with these young college-age women, she was very excited about that. And so we're excited to really work with them around this. So how we see this, in our state with the work that we're doing, and they're meeting this moment. When we work with, 2 of our organizations already had giving circles. And so that was the Community Foundation of East Mississippi and the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. They had what they call the Give Her Circle. And so what we work with them on is expanding the number and who was a part of their giving circle. We wanted them to diversify it, not only by race, but also by age. And so we were looking to help them just to broaden that reach across their communities. The Women's Foundation had a giving circle, and now they're just revitalizing that and getting that going. And one of their focus is maternal health. And so they'll be looking at that. And then with the Lighthouse Black Girls Project, they did not have a giving circle. And so we're very excited to get them going and started and getting that kicked off this fall. But we've been meeting with them, talking about what it means. And so one of the things that we do is encourage them when they embark on this to start a giving circle, that it's not just about collecting money to give out. It's also about educating themselves on the needs and the problems in their community. They need to understand how nonprofits operate. Why do they have the challenges that they have? And then the issues that they're going to target in that community. What can you do beyond the grant? You can give the dollars, but also educate yourself on those issues. Why do they exist? And that's where we start seeing the advocacy piece that comes in. We want them to understand that advocacy is not separate from your mission, that it is how you are going to impact your mission. And we're also helping them to understand that advocacy helps address the root conditions that have been brought along in our communities. And that as funders, as Melissa says, in this bringing you together and being a funder, you are uniquely positioned to act on these issues at a local level. You are part of the community, you understand your issues, and now you're bringing a group together to amplify the voice and to speak up and out about the causes that you care about. And so I'm going to stop right there and thank you for allowing me to be here and looking forward to the rest of our conversation.
Thanks so much, Ellen. I really appreciate it. So you've heard from all of us about different models and strategies at play. I think the biggest thing now, as we talked about at the top of the presentation, is the idea of working together. Taisha did a great job of naming that. And then we talk about how can we do it in our collective areas. We know everyone has a role to play. And so when we think about connecting those examples to what maybe call to actions look like. And I can speak, for the forum and our work with our partners, the biggest inhibitor I see right now within the sector is the silos that traditionally have existed, particularly around foundations and their work, and not being able to communicate to the broader sector. The sector is more than foundations, right? And so how do we break those silos so that we can have a coordinated message to build that advocacy infrastructure that I talked about? Another thing is the education. I tell people all the time, and folks who know me who are on the call, I repeat things on purpose. I'm redundant on purpose, and that's because when folks come to Washington, or even as Melissa talked about, go to state legislators, they're hearing from all types of sectors, all types of people, and so you have to continue to hammer home your message and be redundant. And so our call to action is trying to make sure here in Washington, members of Congress are educated, and so we helped relaunch the Congressional Philanthropy Caucus last fall, and so we are encouraging all of you out there to contact your members of Congress, and we can share a link in the chat to let them know to join the Congressional Philanthropy Caucus so they can understand philanthropy's impact in communities. So I'll open up the floor to my colleagues here to see, what becomes possible when we all work together across these models, and what comes to mind for you.
Well, I think there's a great deal that becomes possible. I'm going to kind of respond to one of the questions that we got around what ways folks are working in this time period to avoid being penalized or punished for work that's perceived as DEI. I think that in this moment where, it is easy and it's rational in many senses to be scared when, our organizations, our personhood is under attack. I think what felt really important for us is to make sure that our partners had the resources they needed in this moment. And this is in a place, I know we have Ellen here in Mississippi, where we saw even before this administration, the attorney general kind of attacking it. He would pull audits of nonprofits year after year after year. And so one of the things is to learn from what folks have done before. I think in the South particularly, we have seen this at the state level for a long time. One of the things that we do is provide safety and security funding for our partners and for their partners. We also support some consultants. There's a group called Fund with Financials that will sit down with any organization that wants to go through their books. And this is what we call kind of being target proof. We don't know that we can stop folks from coming, but we can help folks to be as ready as possible and, to know who to call when they get that email, what the next step is, what they need to share, what they don't need to share. And so part of what we try to do is make sure that folks have the resources that they need to, be as safe as possible, but also that they don't have to have it on their own. They know that they can call their program officer or they can reach out to these consultants. They don't have to start from zero. They have folks who know what's happening, who have engaged in these processes before, who can help walk them through it. And then I think, the other thing that's just really important is for folks that have resources to be a voice. So it's not folks picking off the smallest and least prepared to withstand these processes, but that, if an entity starts attacking someone, as we've seen here in philanthropy nationally, in a state, for other folks to stand up. And I think what we try to do is make sure that folks have the resources so that they feel comfortable and confident to do that. And that's collective action. And what we know is that, if we don't let them get one of us and we actually come together collectively, then that protects everyone. That actually protects the whole. And so I'm happy to have conversations afterwards about what else things look like. Some of that's not wise to share on as broad a forum as this, but I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation.
And I'd love to just chime in and say that I think one of the things that does happen when we work together and that is happening in ways that can help each other is that we are all working on getting people oriented towards this type of collective action and collective giving. It's a real mental shift for people. And certainly at the States Project, one of our jobs is to kind of train people into that mentality. There's no lone hero coming to save us. We all have to build this power. It's actually a very hard story to get across, particularly in America, which is the hero's journey, the Western in Hollywood, the up by their bootstraps single person. I think there's something to developing fluency among people to think collectively and get them into the mindset of, I loved what Ellen said earlier, that anyone can be an incredible philanthropist. Sorry, my husband's bringing me lunch right now. Anyone can be an incredible, thank you. Anyone can be an incredible philanthropist if they know other people. Because what this is about is bringing your friends, your network, your neighbors to the work that you care about. And whether it's, with one of our organizations or with another, we are all getting into this mindset of moving together for power. And I think each of us is helping people learn to do that in the same way. And once people learn to do that, they walk with more power in every space that they're in and with every cause that they're interested in, and it benefits all of us. So I think getting more people into that mindset is a really important piece of the work that we're all doing and that can lift us all.
And I'll add to that one. I just experienced with one of our giving circles, and that's the one on the Gulf Coast with the Give Her Circle, where they're expanding in depth with the age range of young philanthropists. So they recently graduated a cohort of new young philanthropists who have become a part of their giving circle, and this age group is 18 to 35. And so, and they were all women, and not excluding men, but we said that we're focused now on really bringing in young women and helping them to understand where they fit in this model. And so these young women went through a cohort, and I love what Melissa said about the soft power. I think sometimes people get a little uneasy when you talk about advocacy, and they think they got to be very, political with this, and they got to be lobbying. But we supported the Community Foundation in bringing these women together, having them to be educated on how to serve nonprofits, how to serve their community, learning how to be good board members. And so we have there's a cohort of 14 to 15 of these young women, and they had a project also to do with this work. And so they looked around at their community and they recognized that there was a lack of resources or a lack of a place for young women to go to access resources. And so they decided to focus their project on this and addressing young women's and young professional women's well-being. And so they came together and they developed a resource website where young women can go and access resources that have where they can learn more about their community. They can learn more about wellness, their careers. And so as a part of this, we're helping them to understand that they are beginning to understand just the core benefits or the core work of advocacy. You recognized the need, there was something you cared about, and then you did something about it. And you did it together as a group. And our goal now is to work with them even more to help them to understand how to take this voice now that you've built, and also this group of shared beliefs and values, and speak out more on other issues that you care about. So I think for us, what we're doing here is that we're building, showing people how you do this work in a nonpartisan way first, and then as you build and you deepen your knowledge, then you can speak out on all those other things. And so we're proud of that, and that's one of the examples that we have here.
Awesome. Well, we have about 5 minutes, so quickly, I think it's shared a lot of good stuff. I know we could talk longer, but as we close out, just thinking about what success looks like. Ellen just mentioned that people are being afraid of advocacy. I think, the broader sector too, it's more than lobbying. It's about 15 other things you can do that are advocacy related activities other than lobbying. Although in a perfect world, maybe one day we will lobby to get rid of the lobbying restriction that private foundations have. But until then, I think there's a lot of things you can do. And so for me, long-term success looks like building a long-term advocacy infrastructure, normalizing advocacy as a behavior, working together within the sector. And so interested in hearing in the last few minutes that we have from all of you what success might look like for you all as well. We can start with Melissa, and then we'll go from there.
Oh gosh, I have big dreams. I I'm gonna try not to go too far, but I really do believe that, and I have seen this over my years working with giving circles. I really do believe that I still believe, week by week, it gets harder sometimes, but I still believe that there is a core set of American values that are really shared, and they are really captured in, the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The idea that all people are created equal, and that our elected serve with the consent of the governed. They are here, government is here to serve us, and it is here to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the best promise ever made by a government to its people. It has never been kept, but it is absolutely an aspiration. And I think, my big vision of what success looks like is that truly, in a nonpartisan way, we are electing people to uphold that promise and those ideals, and they are building majorities in places that can actually do things to improve Americans' lives. I think we're all looking for that. I think bringing people along and, inviting people in to work towards and walk towards that goal is, the work that I try to do, that our giving circles try to do every day in their communities. And, to break down those walls and those silos and those separate spaces, because we're in this together and we rise and fall together. And I think getting people into that mindset is really important. And it's a soft skill. So I'll just say that. And then I'll pass things over to Melanie or Ellen, whoever wants to go next.
Really
I'll
quickly.
I'll go next. To me, success, and I'm thinking about it in the context of where I live in Mississippi. The success will look like that we are empowering those who are involved in these local issues to use their voice, not to be afraid to use their voice, and to recognize that you're not in this alone, and that you have a network of people across the state who understand what we're going through and how we need to respond and react. And I want to tell folks, don't miss the moment. Commit to doing an advocacy action at least once a year in your life, and start there. Don't miss the moment.
Yeah. All right, Melanie, bring us home.
I think Melissa and Ellen and Matthew have shared so much, such a powerful vision. At the Hive Fund, what we say is that relationships are infrastructure. And so part of my vision is that we are just much more deeply connected, not as only individuals, but all these parts of this whole that it's going to take to usher these powerful visions forward. My vision is that the power of everyday people overwhelms the power of special interests, not only in election days and election seasons, but in our day-to-day lives, so that our government truly delivers for people, and that folks can show up in their full dignity. And that's the vision.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Ty, I'll turn it back over to you.
Gems on gems on gems. This was such a good conversation. Y'all, we need some emojis, some love for the panelists for this conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Matthew, Melanie, Melissa, Ellen. Um, this was a very powerful session, and I'll close us out. But y'all, do the poll that just popped up, please, 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 so that we can get your feedback. This is another way in how we can exercise our voice by completing that survey. But truly want to just this conversation, y'all, is exactly what we all needed. This kind of conversation is what what our movement needs. It was honest, it was urgent, and just really full of hope and a lot of information. And so just thank y'all, and we're so grateful for your time and wisdom and commitment to this work. What I heard and what I know many of you are taking with us is that, as Ellen said, don't miss this moment. We are not powerless, y'all. We are not isolated. We are a movement, a community of people, passionate people with good soft skills. Melissa, yes, with all the soft skill stuff. A community of people who have already chosen to act together. And that is a solid foundation for us, y'all. That is everything. So let's use it. Let's stay engaged and informed and deeply connected with what we each have going on so that we can continue to collaborate and build together. And so the question now is not like a matter of like whether or not we have the power to protect these amazing community-based organizations and causes that we're passionate about. It's whether we're going to use it together in like a coordinated fashion. And so each of us have a role to play in that. And so we're stronger together. Hashtag we're stronger together, y'all. So let's continue to move with that energy. In the next few days, you'll find a recording of today's session on your agenda. I really hope that y'all share it broadly. In the meantime, in between time, let's keep the conversation going. Panelists, if y'all can continue to engage on the forum and share your emails and things like that. Y'all post your reflections, any other questions that came to heart. All of that can be shared on the community forum via Hoover. And also, with that, I said that we were at the top of the session that we have a session raffle winner. And so, drum roll, who's Winnie? Are you still here, girl? Winnie Cody, you are today's winner chicken dinner. And so, please check the chat for a link to claim your gift. And so, with that, y'all, let's head on over to our next session, which is going to be the youth leadership across the 5 T's. Let's go support these next gen philanthropists. And again, thank y'all so much for joining this session, and we will see y'all around. We'll see you there at the next session. This is y'all.